It's time for Recipe of the Day. Today, I am telling you about one of the most popular recipes from my site, Cook the Story. Over 400,000 people a year come to this one, and I've been saving it for you for a basic weeknight because this is a recipe that is going to save your butt. I mean, it's definitely saved mine a time or two. This is for how to cook chicken breasts straight from frozen. This is one of those things that I do if I've had a crazy day and I forgot to stop at the grocery store, forgot to take something out of the freezer, and there are some chicken breasts staring at me down in that freezer, and I just want to get them into the oven and out of the way so that I can move on with the evening. Then I'm going to prep them in this way. They end up with a really nice breading, a little tangy flavor, and they're going straight from freezer to oven, no thawing necessary. Before I dive in, I just have a favor to ask. If you are listening to this on a podcast app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could leave a 5-star rating if you're liking this podcast and a comment, I'd really appreciate it. That helps me out. Not all podcast platforms allow ratings, but the ones that do, they really matter over there. And if you are listening to this on Cook the Story, directly on the Cook the Story site, you can subscribe to this podcast and hear all the recipes. I do a new one every single day, 7 days a week. Head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and you can subscribe there for Apple, Google, Amazon Music, and Spotify, or you can search for Recipe of the Day wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, cooking chicken breasts from frozen. First, what kind of chicken breasts are we talking about? They need to be individually frozen. So either you have brought them home from the grocery store as fresh chicken breasts in like a little styrofoam tray, and then you individually freeze them. The easiest way to do this is to put them on a plate or pan that you've lined with some parchment or wax paper, have them on that plate or pan, not touching, freeze them completely in the freezer. Once they're frozen, then you can put them into a zip top bag or a freezer container. And then because they're already frozen, it's okay if they're touching. They're not going to like freeze together in that solid way. Crucially, we just can't have a clump of chicken frozen together. It is not going to cook evenly. It's not going to cook in any amount of useful time. The other kind of chicken breasts that qualify for this are the ones that you buy frozen in a bag that have been individually flash frozen. You know what I mean? So often there's like a solution that's been coating them, but they are like loose in the bag. If you give it a shake, you can hear them all moving around. I will say that those ones do tend to be wetter, and sometimes the bread coating that we're doing doesn't end up as crisp. But when I talk about the breading in a moment, I will let you know what's going to work the best for those. Okay, so what are you doing? If you are doing the breading, you're going to preheat the oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're just going to bake the breasts just plain, maybe brush some sauce on them for the last few minutes, that totally works. Then you're going to do them for 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The higher temperature is just there to crisp the breadcrumbs. It actually doesn't need to be as high, and the chicken breasts end up a tiny bit juicier if you do it lower. So that is the difference. 350 if you're not going to do a breading, 425 if you are going to do a breading. Then you're putting those individually frozen chicken breasts in a single layer on a baking sheet. It honestly is better to do some kind of broiling pan or an oven safe rack over a pan, and that's just going to let any liquid that comes out of the chicken drip down below, and so then the chicken is not kind of steaming in that liquid. This is especially true for those chicken breasts I told you about that you buy already frozen that maybe have like a liquid solution on them, because they're going to have that extra liquid. This is going to help. Having said all of that, if I am in the kind of lazy mood where I am making this chicken breast recipe, I'm probably not in the mood for finding a rack that fits in a pan, etc., etc. So it's going to work just fine, just on the sheet pan, just not quite as good. So then if you are planning to do some kind of sauce later on these and not a breading, then you're just going to season them with some salt and pepper, a little garlic powder, a little paprika, anything like that's going to be good. If you're doing the breading, we're going to actually season the breading. Just give the chicken a little sprinkle of salt, and then we're going to make this breading. So what it is it's breadcrumbs, 1/3 of a cup mixed with a tablespoon of cooking oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, with salt and pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and some garlic powder, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. You're going to mix that all together to really moisten the breadcrumbs with the oil, and that is going to help them crisp up in the oven because they're going to be protected a little bit from the moisture of the chicken by the oil that we're coating them in, and the high heat of the oven is going to brown them really nicely. It's almost kind of like frying each individual breadcrumb. Now it's going to take a moment for those breadcrumbs to get fully moistened. Just stir, 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 and it will all get moistened. It kind of looks like it won't, and then it kind of looks like a little bit like wet sand, and then it all does mix together. Now I will say, if you are using those wet frozen chicken breasts that I told you about in that solution, you're going to want to use panko breadcrumbs here if you have them. They are already crispier. They're going to turn out crispier when encountering that liquid, that moisture from the chicken. I actually prefer the panko all the time, but if you just have regular breadcrumbs, it's still going to be tasty. It's just not going to get as crispy. Once your breadcrumbs are done, we're going to do something a little bit unique here to stick the breadcrumbs to the chicken. It doesn't do well, unfortunately, to do that like flour, egg, breadcrumb kind of thing that we know how to do from breading other things. The flour doesn't stick well to the frozen chicken. Then the egg kind of starts freezing right away, and then it's really hard to get the breadcrumbs to stick on. It's just a disaster. So instead, what I do is I just brush the tops of the chicken breast with a little bit of mustard. You can use honey mustard, regular yellow mustard, brown mustard, Dijon mustard, anything like that. Somebody in the comments used mayonnaise and said that that worked too. So you're just doing something like that. And just as you brush each chicken breast with about a teaspoon of that mustard, as soon as you do one, sprinkle on the breadcrumbs for that one and push them down just a little bit. And then they're going to have that breading coating stuck to that mustard. It's going to work. Okay. And then the most important thing, how long do you cook them for? So once they are breaded, if you're breading them, or seasoned if you're planning to do a sauce, they're going into the oven for 50% longer than they would normally take. This is according to the USDA, and it works beautifully. All chicken that is frozen individually in this kind of way, whether it's thighs, breasts, wings, take 50% longer from frozen than they normally would take. So if you're in a 350 or 425 degree oven and you're using 5 to 7 ounce chicken breast, which is kind of the average medium to small size chicken breast, we're looking at 30 to 40 minutes. So if you're doing this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, it would normally take about 20 to 30 minutes for them to get up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're looking more at 30 to 45 minutes. That's the 50% more. If you're cooking them at 425, it's going to be about the same amount of time. It doesn't really cut down the time that much. Crucially for this one, I do recommend using some kind of thermometer. So an instant read thermometer is going to be best because you can't stick a probe thermometer into those frozen chicken breasts when you're first starting, right? So instant read thermometer when you think they're close to done or at the lower end of that cooking time I talked about, around the 30-minute mark, you're sticking the instant read thermometer into the thickest part of a chicken breast and checking that it's at 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is it. I did say that if you were not doing the breading and we're doing the sauce, you're going to just add it for the last 5 minutes. Otherwise, I find that it kind of dries out on the chicken because it is in there for a little bit longer than normally chicken breasts are in there for. So just in the last 5 minutes, brush on some barbecue sauce, brush on some honey mustard, a little teriyaki drizzled on there. Anything like that is going to be really, really good, and just cook and warm onto the chicken for the last 5 minutes of cooking. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is March 6th of 2025. You can also get the link to the recipe in our Facebook group. I post the recipe of the day link there every single day, 7 days a week. You will always get a great inspiration for what you can make today. That Facebook group is at facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. I look forward to seeing you there. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.